What's going on, guys? This is Ryan with RK Outpost and The Rise of Skywalker. If you're someone who is critical of Disney Star Wars and the way they've treated the franchise since they took over, this is the gift that just can't stop giving. Because The Rise of Skywalker, the movie, was an absolute mess. I think so many people know that. Not only was it a disappointment at the box office, but it destroyed the prequels. It destroyed the original trilogy. It destroyed the legacy of all our characters. It destroyed so much of what Star Wars is. And now, with this novelization, it's so clear that they're going back and trying to retcon so many of these things to make the movie not as bad as it actually was. But when you really read between the lines, it's clear that these are retcons. It's clear that this was never intended in the movie. And therefore, it doesn't fix anything. And it's never been more clear to everyone that the Lucasfilm Story Group and Lucasfilm in general has no idea what they are doing. Now, we're going to talk about this stuff that came out last night about Palpatine's failed clone actually being Rey's father, which is just insane. I'm sure a lot of you have heard about it. We'll go over it real quick, but I want to talk about what this exposes. This is Matt Martin, a member of the Lucasfilm Story Group. Just to verify, Lucasfilm Story Group member Matt Martin. If you don't know who he is, now a lot of people have their problems with Matt Martin. I get that. I'm not a big fan of some of the things he said about the expanded universe. But for the most part on Twitter, he actually answers a lot of questions about Star Wars as best as he can, which is not always doable. Because again, the Lucasfilm Story Group has no idea what's going on. But I do appreciate he takes the time to talk to a lot of people that ask him questions. So that is one good thing you can say about it. But he says this. Where does it say Rey's dad is a clone? This is March 4th, 9 p.m. Pacific time. This is yesterday, folks. This is like 18 hours from when I'm filming this. That's when this happened. This isn't like 2 weeks ago. This all starts from this thread right here where someone says, this is going to be a weird question. Given the recent revelations about Rey's dad, is Rey Skywalker Palpatine's granddaughter, his niece, or his daughter? And he's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And he says, where does it say Rey's dad is a clone? Now, we will get into this. Let's first talk about that real quick if you haven't heard the news. As you can see in this headline, Star Wars confirms Rey's father is a failed Palpatine clone. Rise of Skywalker novelization reveals that Rey's father is actually a failed Palpatine clone. One of the biggest and most controversial reveal in the film is that Rey is the Emperor's granddaughter. Yada, yada, yada. Yeah, we know. This is all thrown at the last minute. This was never planned. We know that. J.J. Abrams, Chris Terrio, you're full of shit. We know that. Moving on. Oh, yes. Seemingly retcon The Last Jedi stance that Rey came from nowhere. Sure did. Sure did. From a certain point of view. Whatever. For the past few months, Rey's fans have speculated who Rey's grandmother could be, but now it's been confirmed she does not have one. Yep, your Palpatine baby mama theory is crap. No one cares, evidently. That's what they say over at Lucasfilm. During the scene on The Rise of Skywalker novelization, when Rey is feigning taking part in a Sith ritual on Exegol to trick Palpatine, she has visions of her grandfather's past. Now, this is where, after Return of the Jedi, Palpatine thrust his consciousness into a clone body, and the transfer was imperfect. Now, they talk about creating other clones of Palpatine. Now, I want to get into that. We can look at it right here. We can read this for you. I want to read this passage. The heretics of the Sith Eternal toiled, splicing genes, bolstering tissue, created unnatural abominations in the hope that one day one of these strand casts would succeed and become a worthy receptacle. The heretics would do anything, risk anything, sacrifice anything, create a cradle for their god consciousness. Nothing worked, but their efforts were not entirely in vain. One genetic strand cast lived, thrived even. A not quite identical clone, his, quote, son. But he was a useless, powerless failure, did not have the Force, evidently. Palpatine could not even bear to look upon such disappointing ordinariness. The boy's only worth would lay in continuing the bloodline through more natural methods. Now, that is what someone responded to. You can see right here, this is a different part of this thread, same one. Right here, he puts this same thing we just read in. And he just noticed Strandcast, which they said in The Mandalorian. Quill said something about Strandcast in The Mandalorian talking about cloning, if you remember. Matt Martin's response is so telling. Whoa, that wasn't in the one I read. This is when he's asking about how Palpatine's dad is clone. That wasn't in the one I read. This is why I always listen to the audiobooks after they're out. But yeah, exactly what a Strandcast is not yet explained. And then someone says, wait, when do you read the older version? A couple of months ago? I usually read the first or second draft. Typically first. But I may have been later for Rise of Skywalker since I wasn't lead on that one since I didn't work on that film. And just a little interactions about how long it takes to publish a novel. Now, just think about this. This is what I've been saying, guys, that they made this up at the last minute. This clone stuff they forced in there at the last minute. It was never a plan. I talked about how Ian McDiarmid talked about the clone part that got cut out, which was not definitively saying he was a clone. And then all the other stuff he said later in his interview, you can check out that video if you want, where he pretty much explicitly says, talking about surviving the fall, that body surviving the fall, and how they wanted to go in about explaining that. This goes to show the story group members don't even know what's going on with these novels. Why are you, like, what is the point of the story group if you don't know what is going on with the story? This is so important. He had to be told this by someone on Twitter about a book that's already out there. That's what just went on. And I'm not necessarily putting it all on Matt Martin, because I do believe he read this one a couple months ago and wasn't up to date. But we heard the stories from Chris Terrio when they were writing Rise of Skywalker. It wasn't with the story group. It was by themselves. They run down the hall and be like, hey, what do you think about this? Running things past the story group instead of them being involved in the creation of it. How are you supposed to keep your continuity when your guys have no idea what's going on? And this isn't the first time that something like this has happened. I just went back and found a couple things from the past couple months that I could with Matt Martin in specific scenarios like this. Now, this is talking about force healing, where he's trying to explain force healing to some people. The Rise of Skywalker introduced force healing. You can heal anyone using the force. If this is part of canon, why didn't Obi-Wan heal Qui-Gon? Same things we've asked a lot. And Matt Martin says, my read is that healing, bringing someone back from the brink, was only possible due to their dyad connection. I could see a Jedi being able to heal minor wounds. By this logic, Mando secretly force sensitive was a force dyad with Baby Yoda, which is why Baby Yoda is able to heal a lethal wound of Grief Karga. He says, no, I think there's a lot more to the kid than we're privy to at this point in time. Basically trying to make stuff up to explain away that force healing. Now we have something here. This is when it's talking about their entire idea towards canon, towards continuity. Here we go. I generally wouldn't use those as sources. This is just talking about a random Star Wars book. Drew Becker says he may not, but if it's from a company with an official Star Wars license, it's canon until proven otherwise. If not, the opposite is true. And he says, I guess that is where it comes to what your definition of canon comes into play. It's designed to not contradict anything currently public, but a creator would not be beholden to it if their story was to contradict it. So canon until proven otherwise is a good way to say it. But for me, if it won't affect future storytelling, it's not canon. Other media will attempt to make it all line up, but even that doesn't work out sometimes. So I'm basically admitting that they can't keep canon straight. Even in the first 6 years of this thing, they can't keep the small amount of stuff that they have published. They can't keep it straight. And that's just embarrassing. And we have another thing here, talking about the dyad again. Talking about how they were able to communicate telepathically through the dyad, asking Matt Martin, he says, depends how literally you read that, I guess. And then he says, at this point, there isn't really a clear answer to how it works, so there's really not anything I can add. Not a clear answer as to how it works, of course, because you're not involved in making the story. And I feel bad for people like Matt Martin who are forced to go out and try to explain all of this trash. Now, I'm not saying that Matt Martin is a good dude or that he's good at his job, but at least he goes out there and does interact with fans for the most part, doesn't just mass block people, doesn't protect his account, tries to answer Star Wars questions as best he can, even if this whole story group isn't really up to the task. So I can at least appreciate that, even though he obviously works for Lucasfilm, but someone that doesn't necessarily work straight for Lucasfilm, but gets along with them really well, is someone like this, At least he's not this guy. Jason Ward, I don't care about old Star Wars canon and history. That must be why you get along so well with Lucasfilm, isn't it, Jason Ward? I care about results. The Last Jedi is a badass Star Wars film, the best of the current generation. Well, that may be your opinion. That is a low fucking bar, The Last Jedi. But the idea that someone who runs a group called Making Star Wars doesn't care about Star Wars canon and history. That tells you all you need to know. That's who they are catering to, is people that don't care. The people that don't want to remember. People that just want to put their blinders on, go sit down for 2 hours, eat a shit ton of popcorn, and watch lightsabers and lasers. That's who they're catering to. So Jason, you fit right in. Glad you're there, buddy. Glad you're such good friends with Lucasfilm. But let me know your thoughts on all of this. With all that stuff we saw from Matt Martin, that's just a snippet. I could sit here for an hour and pick up more and more and more Twitter threads where he's trying to explain stuff that Lucasfilm has just missed the ball on. But he can't, because Lucasfilm has no idea what they're doing. The story group has no idea what they're doing. And Disney Star Wars is in tatters. But let me know what you guys think about this below. The fact that a story group member didn't know a reveal from this book because they changed it after he saw it. Rey's father was not a failed clone before he saw it, and likely Palpatine wasn't a clone either. I'd really like to get his answer on that, because I am firmly in the belief that they changed that within the last couple months after the reaction to Rise of Skywalker. But let me know your thoughts on that. Let me know your thoughts upon the revelation that Rey's father is a failed Palpatine clone. We are living in a different universe right now. It's sad. But at least we can sit here and maybe have a laugh at a little bit of it, how ridiculous it is. Let me know your thoughts. Smash the like button. Share this video out there. Ring the bell for notifications. Subscribe to the channel. And I'll talk to you guys later. Thanks for watching, everyone. And a huge shout out to my patrons. I appreciate you guys so much. Want to follow me on Twitter or Instagram? Check out the description below. You'll find links to my P.O. box and my Patreon as well. And I'll talk to you guys later.